Hi everybody, welcome back. This is November 30th. It is a Thursday. Today's discussion will continue Prohibition and the prohibition of alcohol in the 1920s and how this was just it was a noble cause. It was the grand experiment. It was an experiment that people thought would work and change social society in the 1920s. However, it did not end up doing that. It was something that many Americans thought it would make all the easy fixes in society. However, all of the problems were not easy fixes, and to attribute all those problems to one thing that people thought was the problem, that was alcohol. They tried fixing that, and it actually made things worse. So the question I asked today is, in today's society, if you looked at it tomorrow, like if sodas were now illegal, selling, making, drinking, importing, exporting sodas were now illegal, would Americans stop drinking it? And then I have you think about that question and give me a reason why you think that is the case. Some people put different answers down because, so maybe some Americans believe that they had the premonition that if you're told to do something, you want to do something exactly the opposite because you feel like you're missing out on something. It's like that experience with kids. Like if kids say don't do this, the kids want to do exactly the opposite because they want to it's either the defiance aspect or it's also something that maybe what they're hiding from me is something that is fun. So let me try it out. So Americans wanted to continue drinking, or at least if the theories stayed the same, would still want to continue drinking soda at this time if it was made illegal, just like it was in Prohibition. All right. So what we do is we review the video we watched yesterday. If you actually go to the video, if I close this down, and I go to Canvas, if you go to your Canvas page here from 11:29, which is yesterday, we go over why does the Harlem Renaissance matter, and we look at the reasons why Prohibition failed, the rise and fall of Prohibition. So we go through this report, the video sheet. If you watch this video and get over some of these answers, get some of these questions answered through this video. Today in class, first thing we actually review those answers. So after we review that, we continue onward with the bootleggers and speakeasies. Now, bootleggers, that term came from the time when people hid flasks in their boot. The flasks themselves are curved on the side, and they you can fit easily down this side of a boot and in between the boot and your leg. So something became known as bootleggers, where you hid your flasks. In the 1920s, these are now known as people who are suppliers of illegal alcohol. And they did this is they applied the alcohol over American borders and into ports. Pretty much the only way you could get alcohol was to bring it in from another country. The big countries were Ireland, Canada, and probably Mexico were the big places that people got their alcohol. Specifically in the northern cities, it was Ireland and Canada was as to where the alcohol came in. And many of the people who took control over these businesses made big time money. Guys like Al Capone probably made in today's money around $1,300 a minute. Yes, $1,300 a minute. I think we worked it up in classes around $1.5 million a day. And that's how much from a 24-hour time period. That's how much he made. So a lot of money being made at this point because alcohol, if it's made illegal, the demand goes up for it. When the demand goes up for it, so does the price. And when the price goes up, that's when the money can really be made. And even the gangsters themselves, when they bring the alcohol in the ports and over the borders, they actually make a bigger profit for themselves than what they initially buy with the alcohol because they take about a third or two-thirds of the alcohol, a third to a half of the alcohol, out of the bottle that it originally came in. They put it into another bottle that looks very similar, and then they dilute it with other forms of alcohol, maybe in some cases water. The more bottles of alcohol they could get based on what they bought, that's the more money they made. So, these guys made tons and tons of money. And when you make all that money, you can actually put that money towards muscle. People who can protect your organization, protect your operation at that moment. So something that Capone did very, very well was to protect his industries, to protect his interests with the money that he made. And most of the time, what keeps him from getting into trouble financially in a lot of these situations is that when he makes all this money, he actually spends it in just the same amount. So he keeps a little bit for himself. He lives like a king, but then he gives a lot of the money to the people that work for him, his lawyers, his accountants, his trigger guys who are responsible for shooting anybody that gets in the way of his operation, for individuals that he's going to pay very handsomely to make sure that his operation continues to run smoothly. And it can even mean paying off judges, juries, and even police commissioners, police officers, lawyers. He'll pay off whoever he needs to make sure he stays in full operation. So that's something that he really does, and his big money really keeps his operation going smoothly. There's no chink in the chain, so to speak, when it comes to this operation. This is a very strong link between his operation and how successful he was. All right. But when this alcohol is sold finally, and Capone, that does make money, he goes to the speakeasies, and he goes to these where bars that operate illegally under selling alcohol, and these speakeasies really do a big number to giving alcohol his profits. Now, ironically, in the 1920s, more saloons opened up after prohibition of alcohol than there were open before. They argue that you could get alcohol much easier in the 1920s during prohibition than you could beforehand, because more and more people were willing to get alcohol illegally and sell it illegally. And in fact, when many people start losing jobs in the end of the 1920s and the 1930s, many people go into gangsterism, and they find jobs within the Italian mob or within the mafia. Not as the leaders or as the people that make decisions, but as individuals who essentially help make the operation run smoothly. They're hired hands, essentially, that help Capone's operation out. So with these speakeasies, the bars open illegally, there's big time money to be made because the demand for alcohol is huge, and Capone pretty much has a monopoly on that industry in terms of what he brings in, especially specifically in his own city. In the city of Chicago, Capone has this monopoly. All right. So what we do moving forward is we look at comparative vices. And same arguments can be made for prohibition of alcohol that were made for the following vices. You look at today's society, obviously, the war on drugs, the fact that drugs are illegal, that people still want to do them, and that the FBI, and that there's an opioid epidemic going on. This is a major issue going on in the country because these drugs are very highly addictive, and the fact that they are illegal, some people say that some of the drugs, not marijuana, not other smaller end drugs, but like the drugs like heroin, cocaine, they should remain illegal for people to use recreationally. But there are other drugs that aren't as bad, that don't have as many negative consequences. That sometimes the reason that these drugs are illegal is because people don't stop doing them. So you make drugs illegal, and as a result, it keeps feeding itself in a cycle that if it's illegal, people might find it a rush to do it. If it's obviously something's being taken away from them that they think is something that is in some cases good. Like obviously the opioids that we see, they get addicted to them because some of them hang out with the wrong people and they get hooked on them. All right, so the war on drugs is something that can be used as well. If you try to get rid of drugs, which we're trying to do now, people will still find a way to get at them. That's what we learn with alcohol. Another one is the war against guns. The argument's been put out there for an overwhelming gun ban in this country. The results of that could be pretty, terrible for how the country will look afterwards. For instance, if you get rid of guns, people will find other ways to get at them. And now you'll have people that have to wait on police to make these issues. And again, those are the only arguments that you have. But again, with the very lax policies on assault rifles today, obviously there's some work that can be done to make those laws different, because having these shootings that we've seen is not good. But again, the argument for the war against guns is the fact that if you take away these guns, people will still find a way to get at them. And the problem is the criminals will get at them, but the law-abiding citizen will not be able to get that gun and protect themselves. So this is a war that goes on. Similar as alcohol. When you get rid of it, people will want it. All right? So this is another one. War against drugs, war against guns. And finally, if you look at your school lunches every day, I have a lot of students that complain to me today about this in class, about how they don't like their lunches. However, there's a purpose as to why your lunches are, and that's because they're trying to fight obesity in the schools, to make sure what you're consuming in schools is not going to be detrimental to your health. I use the example when I went to school here at Central Dauphin, they had a lot of pretty good food, a lot of good foods that you could choose from, plus a lot of also luxuries that in school lunches that many people didn't get ahead of time, like a milkshake machine or a slushy machine. So there are a lot of positive changes that were back when I went to school here in 2002 to 2006. But now with the war against obesity, trying to prevent childhood obesity, you try to control who eats what. If you try to control too much, now it's not a law, but in school, the only kind of food you can get is not desired by a lot of kids. Those kids are going to go home and eat junk, or they're going to go to McDonald's or Sheetz and get whatever they want to satisfy their appetite. And it's an appetite that really can't be stopped, and that's what the problem is. If you try to tell people what's good and what's bad, they're going to want to keep doing it anyways. So I think the decision sometimes you have to let people make their own decisions and live with them. You can't try to, legislate the morality of the topic, all right? The drugs, the guns, or the obesity. These are issues that we deal with today, or we might eventually deal with down the road. And I think using prohibition of alcohol as your example your case study on this, you can probably assume that a lot of them will end up the same way Prohibition did, and that's not in a good way. All right, we're actually going through it right now with drugs. Okay, so we look at comparative vices, and then we watch a video up here. All of the video on organized crime about Capone and the beer wars, Al Capone's beer wars, it is up on Canvas. And there's also a little article that we read as well that is up on Canvas as well, talking about organized crime and its relation to 1920s social life and also 1920s criminal act and also 1920s law. Okay, so if you want to watch those videos, read that article on Canvas. That's all I have for you today. Hopefully this discussion kind of helped you understand a little bit more why Prohibition itself was an experiment, but an experiment that was destined to fail, because you cannot legislate human appetite and you cannot legislate morality, and you cannot tell people what they can and cannot eat or consume. All right? Everyone have a fantastic day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. TGIF. See ya.